Hello, my name is Alexander Morari, and I'm the founder of ITKeyMedia. You've tuned in to ITKeyMedia podcasts about Central and Eastern European startups that are in pre-Series A stage. And our guest today is Hubert Rachwalski, the co-founder of Nethone, a B2B SaaS company that enables online merchants to prevent sophisticated online fraud. It's by and large a data science company specialized in AI-driven fraud prevention and business intelligence. Is that correct?
Yes, hi. It's nice to be here.
Hello, Hubert. Let's start with this little warm up. Imagine I am buying a plane ticket, to Barcelona or somebody else. How would you go? I mean, your tools and the whole solution that you're creating. How would you go to identify whether or not this person buying this ticket to Barcelona online is about to make something fraudulent?
Sure. So, what we are doing typically, and that's how our solution was constructed, is that we are profiling very exhaustively online user sessions. So the transaction attempt is usually preceded by a series of events. Someone needs to open the browser, they need to open up a particular website, and then depending obviously on the context, it can take between seconds and long minutes before a transaction attempt happens. So what we are doing, we are always integrated within the platform. So in this particular case, it would be a browser. So our plugin, our JavaScript is working in the background so that we are able to extract a lot of pieces of information about this user session. And in order to answer a question like what we would see and what would help us determine that we are dealing with a fraudulent one, you need to really understand what fraudsters do, because not necessarily they are interested in doing manual work. They are operating within an environment in which they want to extract money from stolen credit cards, for instance, very quickly. So they would not be engaging in a typical manual behavior, just as normal customers like you and me. We would be strolling through various parts of the website, selecting the ticket, comparing different options, spending a lot of time. We are looking closely at what is happening with the behavior, so how user types, how much time they spend, how do they scroll, where do they pause. We're also closely investigating what is happening with the machine itself. So for instance, whether we are dealing with some sort of automation. Fraudsters like to automate things because they are forced to actually conduct fraud quickly, because this is how they are pressed by the fact that the expected value coming from a package of stolen credit cards is actually decreasing with time. So we are looking for all of these little signals. In total, we are extracting more than 5,500 data points about every single user session. This is obviously just raw material, but if you know how to extract information value from it and you are looking at the right things, it helps greatly to be very precise at identifying sessions. So effectively, characteristics of the user, their behavior, their computer, their network connection, that is not typical for a normal buyer. This is essentially what we are trying to do.
So there's behavioral psychology, and what you're doing is behavioral cybercrime prevention. And correct me. So you said what 5,500 data points during one single transaction, which has to be almost live. Yeah. So geolocation. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Actually, it's even more, because some of these data points come in stream. So for instance, in terms of behavior, there are several scrolls, touches. When we are talking about mobile device, we look at gyroscope, accelerometer. So effectively, this is even more data, but in terms of, let's say, data categories or attributes, this is, let's say, the breadth and depth of the data profiling that we are doing.
Yeah. If we were to group these data points, they are covering geolocation data, as you mentioned, social information, customer history, issuing bank data. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe any blacklists that you're creating or using, number of orders the customer, and all the other heat maps. What else?
I mean, actually, to be very precise, not really some of the ones that you listed, because we are really concentrating on what we are seeing here and now. So any customer history, this is something that our machine learning models are perceiving that this is something that the merchant needs to share with us, because we are observing the session as it is. It can last 15 seconds, it can last 45 minutes. This is where we collect the material. For us, it's really important to provide this additional dimension to all the data points that merchants and the platform operators are already handling, because it's not that they don't collect any data about the users. We are just providing a different angle because we have built set of our software, our proprietary technology is based on ability to extract things that are not so obvious to be extracted. That's why our value proposition is so compelling. So for instance, just to provide you some examples, maybe it will be easier to picture this. We are, for instance, looking very closely at what is happening with the processor of the device. Someone would ask, why is it relevant for identifying fraud? But the answer is a little bit more complex, because, as mentioned, we are really looking for any signals that would indicate that someone is behaving in a different way than a typical user. So if we are talking about sophisticated, automated pieces of code, for instance, someone is using a sophisticated bot to imitate that a user is pretending to be conducting a shopping experience. This obviously has an impact on what is happening with the machine itself. For instance, if the user, a fraudster, is trying to anonymize themselves, you mentioned geolocation, they are often using VPNs, for instance, or they are proxying their network connection. And by looking closely at the TCP protocol of how the device is actually connected with the server of the website, and by investigating for little signals, we are able to identify paths that help us identify that this is a VPN, this is proxy. Obviously, the strength of the solution comes from that we are not discriminating a user session based on just one negative signal. Many normal users, especially in corporate settings, use VPNs for daily activities. So saying that someone uses VPN shouldn't automatically lead to fraud. That's why fraudulent behavior. So that's why we are looking at such a broad set of characteristics, so that, and we are using machine learning, not rules, so that we are able to discriminate only what really needs to be discriminated and not generate a lot of false alerts.
Yeah. So VPN services, I've been using VPN services myself for like 2 years now already. Very much successfully, and so and sometimes I would be changing an IP address from a country to a country, trying to hunt a better offer from a service or something. Would I be a false positive, or what's the idea behind not making me a false positive?
Sure. So we would recognize that you're using VPN. So this is versus strength of having this piece of information. But we know that, for instance, just VPN is very often not enough to deal with a fraudster, just like in your case. What fraudster would typically do, so VPNs are useful for hiding an identity of fraudster. They do not want to show from where they are actually logging in. But for instance, they are often using also virtual machines, so that they are able to initialize several browser windows of different types at the same time. So if we are seeing, for instance, a combination of there's a virtual machine, there's VPN, and there are several other factors, for our machine learning models, it's often enough, it is suspicious enough to flag such a session. But we are not typically presenting, or we are not offering a setup in which a single characteristic would disable or would discriminate a particular user. This is what we've been fighting for, actually, very beginning when we started, because still, I would say over 80% of the online industry is using rules-based systems. So this has been created in the 90s, and this is like, let's say, going back to how fraud was solved back in the day. But it's still, unfortunately, the case. We are trying to slowly change this way of operating, and obviously once, or back in the day when merchants were able to extract or maybe have 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 attributes about the user, it was quite easy to build logic, or it was natural to build logic based on rules. So if variable 1, 2, 3 happened, then do something. But if we are currently able to extract so much more, we are talking about thousands, and I mentioned the stream, some variables coming in stream, it's simply not possible to do it effectively with so many different variables. So you need to use different data processing methods. That's why machine learning is so useful, because it can find correlations, it find information value where even very good analysts not, because it's simply too many columns, too many attributes to look for.
Hubert, you see, this is not virtual background. This is reality behind your back. I mean, all those books that are stacked up behind you. And I'm sure somewhere there is hidden a book by some George. And tell me, would George Orwell love such solution on toolbox that you are developing, and why, or why not?
Actually, yes, there is actually 1984 somewhere there. I'm not sure, and I believe that indeed what we are doing sometimes is perceived as going too far, at looking at things that you should not look for. But what we try to keep in mind is that we are bringing a very powerful set of tools to really fight a very real problem. So if you take into consideration the intent, if you look at the size of the fraud problem, even if you just look at the payment fraud problem, which is just obviously part of the fraudulent ecosystem, fraud ecosystem, we are talking about dozens of billions of dollars yearly lost by organizations by this phenomenon. So we are often communicating that we are extracting certain data points, but we are also very diligent in terms of how we use them. We are always cooperating with our clients in terms of maintaining the right data retention policies and information rights policies, in terms of what kind of data being extracted, why they are being extracted, how long they are stored. If someone would like to take a look at them, there is a set of procedures for this. So we are not just extracting as much as possible and trying to figure out what we can do with all of these data and how we can monetize this. Data coming from a client is the data of end users of this client, and we are very respectful of this. We are aware of the fact that it might cause certain questions. It sounds really invasive, or it might be interpreted as invasive, but at the end of the day, our mission is really to eliminate friction. Because if you look at this problem from a different perspective, false positives, so these false alerts we were talking about a few minutes ago, what effectively lead to is worse shop experience, because you ask a question whether you would be blocked by a particular website if you're using VPN. I can tell you for a fact that probably not by 100% of websites, but there will be a website, and probably many of them, that would flag such an attempt out. Maybe it happened to you already when you were trying to purchase something while being abroad, paying with an American credit card while you are somewhere in Europe or being in Asia. This happens all the time. This is the cost of using rules. This is the cost of how the legacy systems are operating. And what we are proposing is actually ability to be more precise. We do not want to reject as many good, healthy, as we call them, users. We want to really be very precise, and we need to use this complicated and maybe a little bit futuristic machinery in order to be very precise in stopping the bad ones and letting all the other ones in order to have a very seamless, frictionless experience. This is what everyone wants to enjoy online these days.
Yeah, Hubert. You know what? I imagine that all these like harvesting of data is in a way similar to basically accumulating gunpowder in one and cramming into one warehouse and creating a very dangerous, explosive, let's say, situations. Are you not afraid, or at least apprehensive of potential leakages, or let's say like explosive situations of all those big data warehouses that you're helping to create or contributing to?
Of course, and to comment here, just to paint the right picture, is that of course we are collecting data and we need to be super precise with this and super careful with this. We are a cybersecurity at essence, so of course also internally we need to look for and constantly invest in new security measures and certifications and penetration tests, various methods of making sure that we are not putting our guard down. So this is one aspect. The other aspect is that we are not centralizing everything in one place. We are using cloud technologies, and we are actually, because of the fact that we are operating with several different clients, operating globally in various geographies, we are also leveraging the beauty of distributed cloud services, so that we can leverage hosting centers in various parts of the world. So it's not that everything is sitting in one place and is just waiting to be penetrated, and all the data will be flying around. Another aspect is that the way or what we extract, these are really low-level identifiers. Like when we are looking at how the processor is behaving, these attributes do not mean much to anyone who doesn't really know what they mean. We are not building a strength of our solution by collecting personal identifiable information. This information is stored and processed by our clients. They have access to it because this is part of, let's say, operating within the physical world. We are bringing data that they cannot extract. So, for instance, an information about what is the speed and pace of losing battery on your computer is not necessarily compromising you as a person. I might be wrong, but I can risk a statement that if I knew what is happening with your battery, like, would you be that, let's say, would you violate it in any way? It's not that I would leak your age, your insurance number, or your even date of birth. This is much more invasive. So by nature, what we are doing is very closely related to the session itself, to the device itself, to the characteristics of the network. And there are very few elements that might be considered sensitive in a direct sense. It doesn't mean that the data we gather are not sensitive, because the entire picture put together obviously paints a certain image, but these are, let's say, this warehouse of gunpowder. You really need to know how to use this to, and also the purpose how we construct the data points that we extract, and what kind of how to make sense out of it. This is also part of the know-how that we've been building. So it is not as simple as it might get, but I totally agree that we need to be very responsible. We need to invest in security, in cybersecurity, because if we want to propose best cybersecurity to companies around the world, we need to be humble enough to make sure that we are also complying to certain standards.
Hubert, yes, let's get back to the scenario for the podcast. Round one solution. In a very, very nutshell, how would you describe your solution?
I would say it's a eye opener, effectively. If you are running a platform, it can be a website, it can be a native application installable on a mobile device. Our solution gives you an access to a lot of data about your users. And at the same time, this data is extremely useful for understanding these users from a risk perspective, from a creditworthiness perspective, and so on and so forth. So because we know this data so well, because we have crafted the way it is structured, we also developed machine learning based methods, models, to extract information value and deliver very actionable recommendations to merchants. For instance, you want to know what's the risk of payment fraud, this is your recommendation, and these are the arguments why we believe it is that high or that low.
And technically,
you want to know what is the...
Yeah, sir. And technically, the merchant,
Yes.
the e-tailer would get a recommendation from the system, I understand, to go through with the transaction or to reject the transaction. What other
Yes, it happens.
outcomes? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. So it can be either accept, reject, or for some business cases, we also operate with a manual review. So for certain processes, it makes sense to have an additional layer of verification. So these are typically the output classes, but very importantly, probably mostly because technology adoption life cycle for this part of the world and economy is not yet that advanced. there is a lot of hesitation towards black box solutions.
Sorry,
So
when you
even
say,
if
sorry,
we
when
might
you
have
say for this part of the world, you mean sector-wise, like online retail, or you mean geographically?
risk management. No, risk
Okay. So,
management. I'm
which is a very new area basically, and it's like developing with huge steps like every year, right? And
I mean, I would.
cybercrime is developing, but so the cybercrime prevention has to be. By the way, here's the dilemma: are you trying to catch up with the cyber criminals, or can you like be ahead of them? What's the rule of the game there?
Sure. So obviously, this is a very interesting race because we are using advantages of new technologies, but also our opponents are using advantages of technologies. So there is a very even more interesting dilemma because we are using machine learning to uncover fraudsters, and they might be using machine learning to create methods for fooling anti-fraud systems. So for sure, it's a race. We have positioned ourselves as the ones that really search and engineer for the lowest possible data points, meaning that we are not necessarily searching for a particular implementation of a pattern. Just example being VPN or virtual machine. It is not so important for us to detect VPN of like particular version of a VPN, application of a VPN, which is much easier. We much rather are interested what is happening with the internet connection. What is happening with the packets traveling from the device itself all the way to the server when we are dealing with a connection that is coming through a VPN. So we are going, that's why a little bit lower in order to be one step closer to the fraudsters, because what they do, and that's back to the race that they mentioned, they know perfectly that one way of losing the opponent is by changing little parts of their setup. So for instance, if most of the fraud tools would learn how to identify a particular implementation of a virtual machine, they just need to change to a different implementation of virtual machine, because the digital signatures of this implementation will be completely different. But for us, by observing what is happening with the memory card, what is happening with the processor, while being on a virtualized operating system, allows us to be one step ahead of the competition, and much closer to the opponent. But I wouldn't say we are ahead of the opponent. Opponent always makes the first move. If they wouldn't make the first move, we wouldn't have a problem to fight with.
Yeah. And so your challenge is basically to shorten the time of advantage, so to say, and to close the gap and the handicap that they are creating for themselves. Okay. What about so as far as client groups, I understand it's basically every small, medium, big business doing business online, right? Online retailers,
Yes,
what else?
but yeah, online retailers. So for retailers that have physical delivery, so like goods that have physical form being shipped, but also
I mean payments online.
Yes, payments online, but also financial services online. So you can apply for a loan now online. You can get various financial products online. So obviously, wherever there is an incentive for someone to intercept, to pretend to be someone they are not, and collect some financial reward, by definition, there will be someone who is trying to extract this money. So, and obviously, when we are, as long as there is a chance to have this profiling done and take a look at the device, take a look at how this device is connected to the server and what kind of behavior happens, because this exhausts let's say this event. When we are talking about buying something or transacting online, you only have three things. You have a device, you have a user that behaves, and you have a connection that links the device and the user with the platform. So this is it. And that's why we are concentrating on these three, and we are trying to exhaust this dimension, because that's where we can find, or at least search for, signals that something might be not typical. And this is what we are doing essentially.
Yeah. What's the business model behind that solution?
We believe that But there will be more and more transactions online. So we obviously want to price for every event, every transaction, every critical event, because it doesn't need to be a financial transaction. It can be login to a particular platform. So it can be registration attempt to a particular platform. So it can be transaction in a broader sense, meaning that two parties need to have a little bit of trust to initiate a follow-up, let's say. So that will be an abstract way of defining transaction for us. And we believe that there will be more of them because everyone is using online more and more. And obviously, COVID is accelerating certain things. And so we want to charge per number of these events we are able to do. And at the same time, we know that the more events we see, the stronger our profiling capabilities become, because we might detect things that we didn't detect before. But at the same time, our machine learning techniques are becoming more powerful, because the more data, the more chances that we will be finding correlations where that we didn't find before.
As far as the business model, what is the pricing strategy you have right now with your ongoing clients?
Yes, we are applying a unit fee per event, and obviously we are using some cascade pricing so that the more events particular client is sending our way, the unit, so the marginal cost for them becomes lower. And this is typically a numbers game at the end of the day.
Give me an example of a relatively average, let's say, kind of average pricing tag on a package of events, or what's your approach? Like,
sure,
it's mid-range.
It is really dependent. It is really dependent on the setup, but the pricing is quite competitive on the market. So usually it's a few cents per event that is being protected. This is what we typically see. When the volumes are low, obviously it might be more than 10 cents. If the volumes are extremely high, it can be fraction of cents even. So it really depends on the volumes and obviously the setup and some complexities around what needs to be done actually.
So interesting, per transaction, not per transaction, actual financial transaction value. This is something you don't care.
We obviously care extremely because this is one of the transaction, what is being the subject of transaction is a huge piece of information, whether it's typical, whether it's not typical. There's obviously a bigger impact for our clients. So we take care about this a lot, but from quite honestly saying, from a perspective of our costs, it doesn't make any difference for our machines, for our setup, for what we offer, whether something costs €100 or $10,000.
But you can use these arguments during the negotiation phase, right? I understand. And then,
of course,
as this is the opportunity to prevent bigger risks, so then your pricing is a little bit different. So you factor this in, right? The transaction value itself, you factor this into your unit pricing. Okay.
I mean, we are not selling products. We are working directly in B2B relations. So there's obviously always discussion. Every step is slightly different. So I guess it's difficult to make generalizations. It can be a more expensive good, but maybe there are some significantly lower complexity somewhere else. So I wouldn't like to simplify that much.
Yeah, of course. So let's go to round two. Competitive landscape. Competitive landscape is not simple either, basically. There's a huge army of competition in cybercrime and fraud prevention. Like hundreds and hundreds globally. How do you plan to stand out from the crowd?
Sure, it's a great game. Obviously, a number of competitors also makes or confirms the fact that what we are doing makes a lot of sense, because if there are companies willing to spend time and money and investors backing them, that's obviously the strongest reason why there is something to it, right? But at the same time, it's a huge market. So it's not that we are like these, maybe you said hundreds and hundreds, I wouldn't go that far. It's still, I would say, dozens of maybe like there is a number of very, very serious competitors in this space, but we are all tackling a global challenge. We are talking about trillions of dollars going through the internet. So we honestly believe that there is room for many different approaches, and it's all about positioning. It's all about go-to-market.
Yes.
It's all about some differentiation on the product end, but also maybe in the business model end. So it's definitely not one of the markets where first mover advantage is what makes or breaks everything. Sure, scale matters, but there's also a lot of diversity in terms of what kind of frauds someone might be better at, and what kind of businesses might need a slightly different flavor of protection. So having said this, we are positioning ourselves as a solution, actually a very heavy gun. So we like to say that we might not improve situation much if someone is honestly not operating within a space or within a geography that deals with the most sophisticated cyber threats. We are investing so much, and we have been engineering, heavy engineering focus from day zero, and still we are almost 80% of our team are engineers of different specialties. So we like to go, or we like to, this is part of our go-to-market strategy towards areas that have biggest pains, because we simply believe that there is certain diffusion of let's say nominal level of risks across from the very risky markets all across the board. So that's where we like to compete. That's where we find our best cases. That's where we are able to show best uplift on performance, and then from them we are able to diffuse with the trends to broader target addressable markets. And we do this in several different segments, from e-commerce, digital goods, and financial services. At least that's how we have been shaping it, and it works pretty well.
Yeah, but anyways, let's cover at least some of the competitors. Would you say what Riskified or Frogster or Redpoint, you know those companies probably. How do you like compare your competitive edge to theirs? Is there anything you could mention? Yeah. I'm more interested in Riskified, which seems to be the most funded at 300 million euros or so. Right now, and can you juxtapose or you know compare your solution to theirs in a nutshell? Of course.
I mean, of course, it's but since the podcast, like all of the ones that you mentioned are great competitors, and really appreciate what they are doing. I'm much more comfortable and much more confident about speaking what we are doing.
Yes,
we are not experts on their end. So as mentioned, our edge or our positioning is concentrated around really concentrating on businesses that deal with big threats. And that's where we like to go, compete, challenge all the competitors, including the best ones out there, and prove that what we've built in terms of data extraction and machine learning actually can provide a significant upside for our clients.
Yes, great diplomatic answer. Let's move on, Hubert, to round three. Companies' ups and downs in the last 12 months or so. What would you say is the biggest failure of the company, your own as a co-founder? Choose whatever you like to share.
Maybe it's a matter of language, but we are not calling them failures. There's a lot of experience that we have been enjoying over the last period. Some of them were positive, some of them were negative. Quite naturally for all of us, the world changed significantly. So for instance, one big change that we had to deal with was related to how we actually go to market and sell, because ever since we started our commercialization efforts, we have been relying quite heavily on physical events, industrial groups, conferences, conventions that gather professionals from risk and fraud space, payments as well. And we had a chance to present our content, engage in discussions, show what we do differently, have demo sessions, and so on and so forth. And obviously, as long as a lot of these events, or at least some of these events, moved online, the experience is completely different. So we had to adapt as a company how to actually engaged with potential buyers in a completely different setup. So that was one of the big changes.
Hubert, but this switch from offline face-to-face interaction to online helped or create a more challenging kind of context?
I mean, at the beginning, any change creates some negative impact because you need to adapt, but it's too early to say how it will look like in the future. For now, I believe, or we are happy with what we've been able to do as a reaction to the change that we perceived. So for sure, first moment was, okay, so how do we do it? And actually, I would say that after the few months that we had so far, we are reckoning that since the world changed for everyone around, we are still considered to be okay. We are not just a startup with 5 people that just trying to do something. We are already with some presence, but for all the legacy, well-established players, actually the change was a little bit more difficult because they are used to sponsoring certain events and having particular modus operandi for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years in some cases. Yeah, so for them, adapting is probably a little bit more difficult than for someone that is doing this for 2 or 3 years. So I would say that it was a level play, it was a leveling of the playing field in certain way, and obviously ability to check how quickly players can adapt, how do they tap into certain opportunities. It's too early to say whether we will benefit from it in the long run or not, but for sure it created some additional challenges and opportunities at the same time. So that was one. The other one I wanted to mention is that since we are in business model, and then we mentioned this earlier, we want to see more traffic, but obviously certain companies that operate online benefited largely. Some of the other ones not necessarily. For instance, you referred to travel industry earlier on, and quite clearly, as this is public knowledge, the number of flights, number of tickets sold, these figures went down. So for our partners or potential clients, that has been a very difficult time, and we, as someone who's observing this from a perspective who is looking at every single transaction attempt, this is always also very challenging. So that was another, let's say, dimension or reason why we had to adapt or we had to change something. Currently, actually, travel is very important for us. We believe long term that travel will be flourishing, and we hope to see the growth coming again. And it's great to hear, because we are observing the patterns, we are observing fraud and risk that is happening there. We're actually monitoring some of the statistics that we have that try to explain how much fraud there is, like relatively speaking, within, for instance, within different industries. But we are talking about travel now. So actually, with the very dynamic decline of volumes, we saw that relatively there is much more fraud within the travel sector. So with this message, we were able to go to some of the partners, and actually we were backed by great ones like AWS, who is our technology partner for a while, and but also Plug and Play in US, and they joined us in the mission to actually support travel merchants. So AWS is subsidizing largely the infrastructure cost if a particular merchant is undergoing difficulties because of COVID, and most of them are, but they would still want to have additional protection from us. So it's great to see that such events can actually produce very fruitful partnerships between parties, and then hopefully we'll be able to support certain businesses. And in the long run, this is what we need to do in order to support each other.
Yeah, interesting logic there. Like fewer transactions produce proportionally increased number of, at least in percentage, right? Increased percentage of crime ratio, which increases the urgency for solutions like yours, right? Interesting.
Yeah, and at the same time, if you are from an airline or online travel agency perspective, you have your volumes disappeared, or like are really like you were supposed to grow and you are down 50%, let's say, and then every single transaction attempt you reject, you should really think twice, because this is a very fragile item you have now. So false positives, back to the false alerts from the beginning. You cannot afford them. So you cannot use rules. You need to use a more precise way of dealing with this, especially in the times like this.
Yeah, interesting. Hubert, interesting. Let's move on to round 4, company from the team side. The co-founding team includes you as a CEO, right? And who else is in the founding team?
Sure. So there is Sasha Alexander. We call him Sasha because of his roots. He is responsible for the product development. He has been with us from the very beginning. So a lot of the interesting discussions there. Now we also have within our C team Mateusz, who used to be a management consultant and then worked in Silicon Valley for tech companies. And we were able to convince him to come and help us with operations, both customer operations, but also business operations. So how to scale the business as an organization, what to do with people, what to do with culture, so that we are really a well-oiled machine. So that once we are able to bring more and more clients, we are actually able to support all of the opportunities that are coming our way. So this is it. But we have a history starting our adventure within a venture builder. So I was very lucky to meet both founders of our venture builder, Daft Code, and they have been very involved at the beginning, and we are still obviously investors. One of them is our supervisory board member, engaged in security research in his other life. So we are still in very active collaboration. And great technical minds that helped us start it. They provided a lot of resources and knowledge how to start up a company and how to actually transition from an idea to a very initial project to MVP, and then laid some foundations so that we could go on and build a company around this.
What about the rest of the team? How many people in the team right now?
Currently, it's around 65, and it's a very interesting size, because it's already a size in which you need to have certain procedures and processes. There's certain middle layer management needed for a group of 3 C team members to really coordinate what is happening with the investors, shareholders, and all of this complexity. But at the same time, it's not yet a 100+ business with enough scale to justify all the roles and so on. So I guess it's a very difficult trip from this 40, 50, 60 to 100+. But we are enjoying the ride, and we are happy that Mateusz, our COO, is on board, so that while I'm concentrating mostly on commercial aspects and investment topics, Sasha can dedicate his time to product and technology. There is someone who can think about the internal infrastructure and how what organization need, what kind of skeleton, as we call it, need to accommodate room and actually make it effective for all the muscles, so the people we have to make it work and make it a very powerful organism.
If in a normal situation, would you all be in an office, or parts of the team is remote?
Like before COVID, we
yeah. I mean, in a normal situation, let's say, which will come sooner than later.
Let's hope, and let's not bet on that. But yes, pre-COVID, most of the team was based out of office. We tried to have a degree of, let's say, flexibility and remote work, but besides the commercial roles and people that we just hired for particular locations, it was not very deeply engraved. And now, obviously, another inspiration, another opportunity arrived. So we are experimenting much more. Now we are 100% working remotely, given the situation, but we are actually thinking how to structure and how to strike the balance between benefits of remote work and benefits of being all together in one space to improve the working experience at the end of the day.
What program, software, applications help you most to keep the company, as one and to be effective in this remote kind of era? right now? Like
for us, it's very, for us, it's really important. I mean, obviously, we use lots of asynchronous communication. This is important to be on Slack, on whatever communicator the team likes to work. Like we are trying to encourage everyone to be on one so that there are not, let's say, some dead ends in terms of communication. But for us, it's really, really important to encourage people to use video, because when you are able, even if you're at distance, but you are not just hearing, but you are looking at all of this nonverbal communication, and you see whether someone is smiling, how they react, what's the body movement. We are a profiling company at the end of the day. We need to, we are automatically built around searching for these additional data points. And if it's just sound, it might not be enough. If it's just text, it might not be enough. So we really try to encourage to be using cameras and really paying attention to this, because sometimes you can get lazy around this, right? Also during integration events, so like after work, we are trying to encourage, and we are organizing different activities. We cook together, we do karaoke together, we do various, we solve, actually right now there's an integration event, we solve some crime case, game case together in groups.
Screen to screen mode, right? Like online videos, synchronous, as you say, and then you do some group activities, but even in a remote mode. Interesting. Look, share some experiences that you've had as far as this online, online video kind of integration events. What has worked most successfully?
I would say like anything that can unravel something that you don't typically discover during work. Because if you think about integration events in brick and mortar world, like you like to go karting because you don't know how people drive, and it's fun to see whether maybe people that you would never guess are better at this than someone else, right? So like cooking is great for this, because obviously there are people that do it well and there are people that completely suck. But since it's not a contest, it is nice to share these moments outside of the typical working experience, and you can be very creative in this. And the best hint I would say is just to listen to your people. Every group is different, and as a leader, you should really listen and try to understand what they would like to go. And by building culture, you should like enable the environment and the group of people to make their choices within certain bounds, obviously, so that it is consistent. But this is the most genuine, and people will appreciate it most, I guess.
Yeah. And when you mentioned cooking, have you been cooking like the same dish all around, or like,
But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, because ever since this COVID started, there are companies actually that organize these events. There is a chef with a very high definition camera and professional filming studio, just like in cooking shows. And on the morning of the day when this session happens, everyone gets a delivery of all the ingredients. So you don't need to worry about going to a shop and missing something or not having enough amount. So everyone gets in the fridge, 7 p.m. or whatever arrives, and we start, and the chef is trying to guide us, obviously looking at our failures. Some people have some problems. So there is some discussion around how we can remotely help someone to do it, or help me. Like last time I had some issues with my cake. So this is just very natural. At the end of the day, after all day, you need to eat something, right? So it's just a way also to satisfy a basic need with a little bit of entertainment and staying together as a team, which I believe is very important during these days.
What a great team. I will ask you to share details about this company providing this cooking on integration. And by the way, Hubert, are you hiring right now? And if yes, for what roles are most urgent?
Yes, we do hire, and actually we are hiring, or we have open recruitment, and we are working on filling these positions across the board. Like a lot of the engineering, because by share of our operations, like as mentioned, almost 80% is engineering. So naturally, big bulk of recruitment is coming from there. But we definitely need to strengthen our commercial structure. We are still a very small team there, and there's more and more potential. So we want to invest into sales roles, but also for performance marketing, for growth hacking, for various units that are very small now, and we want them to build.
Let's pick the sales function, so to say. What's the most important for a sales person to join and be successful, you think?
For us, it's probably, given the times especially, and that's back to the challenges we had or opportunities. We really find that it works well if you have not necessarily just sales experience, but you have a sales experience that is relevant for what we do, meaning that you already know the people that maybe you were selling something completely different to them, but they know you and you know them, you know what their challenges are. So you have the network that is relevant for what we do. And the second very important thing is related to actually understanding how payment ecosystem works. It's super complex. There's a lot of regulation. It changes all the time. And it really affects what we need to say, how we need to present arguments. And you can have a best salesman, but if they don't know these details, they will not look convincing. So you need to have experience in the financial payment related job. Mm-hmm. And the third one is related to technology, because we noticed that you don't need to be the best speaker, but in order to be convincing, you need to sound genuine and authentic. And that comes especially if you have certain degree of passion, and passion comes from understanding. Like, I don't believe that you can be passionate about something if you're not searching for these reasons why it works like this or it works differently. So effectively, it's another very difficult fact, because not every salesperson needs to be an engineer, and this is not expected, but you need to have this ability and also capability of understanding certain things and willingness to learn even more, because we are dealing with a complex programs, complex anomalies that we are trying to detect. So in order to be convincing, you need to understand it and be willing to understand even more.
Plus, probably also the ability to simplify things sometimes, because your clients cannot be, so knowledgeable about this stuff that you know in-house.
Yeah, definitely. And that comes, I deeply believe, and this is the same at school or at a university, the best professors know how to say difficult things in a simple way. So if you have the understanding, if you're willing to learn it really and understand it really, you will be able to find words. Maybe it will not be the best speech, but it will be understandable. If you are just reciting or you are trying to send a blurb of different words, that will not be digestible for the other party. And again, it will not be convincing.
I have a recipe for you. In a nutshell, you might say that you need a Neil deGrasse Tyson interested in cybercrime prevention.
Yes, find me one, and we can take it after the show. Yeah, there are people like this, so we are not complaining really, but it is another beautiful challenge of what we are doing. But it's a pretty well-defined set of skills. It's not for everyone, but for the ones that are like this and are also another aspect, and it's true for anyone who would like to join a company like us, is that effectively we are trying to do something good. Obviously, we are trying to make buttload of money and help our customers to be richer and richer. But at the same time, we are not doing it by creating another app that takes more time of kids so that they will stare at it and do. We are really trying to fight a problem, people that are stealing money from other people. So that makes it a very good mission. I believe it helps us a lot, because while recruiting, while onboarding, while being with people, at the end of the day, it's not about creating something that is not necessary or it's not useful, at least. So this is really great, and that essentially, I would say this is what keeps us up at night.
So your vision helps to execute and realize the mission of the company, which is easy to define. With this in mind, let's move on to round 5, Formula F3, we call this, funding for the future. And before we discuss the future, as far as the history by now, correct me if I'm wrong, total funding by now is around 6 million euros raised in total. And that's a mixture of debt, equity, public financing, grants, and so on. And speaking of that part of your history, can you share how much dilution you've taken by now?
I wouldn't be comfortable sharing these numbers.
Of course. Interesting. But I had to ask. Let's move on. What about the next financing round? Do you have this in mind? And if yes, when? And what are the general expectations for the next round?
Sure, we are actually approaching our Series A moment. We have done two smaller fundraising. I guess they are not fully public yet, so let's not go into details over the course of 2020. But there is very good traction recently, so we believe that we are organizationally but also commercially ready for injecting more fuel. So we are actually planning a Series A in the upcoming months.
Yes, can you share some more parameters of the Series A? Yeah.
Yes, I guess it will be quite typical, I would say, for where we are in this part of the world. So it will be between 4 and 6 million euros equity round that we want to complete with a group of investors. We really would like to have institutional investors representing access to markets in Western Europe and potentially other geographies that are relevant for us. We are present outside of Europe, in Asia, and especially in Brazil, in some parts of Latin America. So this is our priority. We are really searching for a hands-on investor. We have a few, let's say, commitments already. So we are trying to build an interesting consortium around this and complete the process within the next months.
Yes, and just to make sure, your pitching around has started already for Series A, or you're just unfurling the process. Okay. So clear, success with that, of course. And Hubert, what about the end of the road? Do you have any picture of your exit plan right now? And if yes, share a little.
We are obviously we are thinking about this. It's important to think 5 steps ahead, but this is we hope it's still quite a long road in front of us because there is so much to do, and I guess it's not any near future. It's a matter of a few years, I would believe.
Hubert, thanks. That was a great chat. I hope we'll be following your successes, just as you're following all the cyber crimes out there. Thank you very much for the chat. All the best.
Thank you very much.
So Nethone, everyone. A great combo of vision and mission there to fight a global problem. We could say that Nethone is patrolling seas and oceans of big data to prevent cyber criminals from fraudulent transactions. The chase is not easy, as Nethone's opponents are by definition one step ahead of them often. Let's wish Nethone to be able to catch up with the fraudsters quicker and more effectively with time. That's it for now. Bye-bye.